I'd like to welcome you to the Wednesday Bible study for Macedonia Baptist Church. And we today are starting a new series in the book of James. And we call this the book of trials and temptations. And as we get into the text of this book, we're going to see that James is writing to his hearers and helping them because they are going through many trials and temptations. Just going to deal with verse 1 today as an introduction. James, a bondservant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. Now, James here uses a familiar word that Paul used also in calling himself a bondservant of God. And of course, this was a humble position that he held, and the bondservant was a slave, and that bondservant was released by his master, set free. But then the bondservant would choose to stay on with his master and to serve the master, but it was a different relationship. The bondservant was as if he or she were a part of that family and not just a slave. So this is James's feeling that he's a bondservant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. And he addresses it to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. And of course, this is the 12 tribes of Israel. I want to talk a little bit about the theme of James. You know, sometimes when we share our testimonies as Christians, it can sound like, well, before I came to Jesus, I had a lot of problems. Now my problems are solved. But the Christian life is not that simple. We still go through hard times as believers. But we know that in the midst of these hard times, we're not alone. We have the power and resources of God, who is all wise and infinitely good, so that we're able, through prayer and faith-filled action, to have joy regardless of our circumstances. This is the main theme of the book of James. The book of James was written by James, the half-brother of Jesus. And of course, Matthew 13:55, is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? So James was one of Jesus' half-brothers. During Jesus' earthly life, the Bible records that even his own brothers did not believe in him. John 7:1-10. But after Jesus' death and resurrection, he appeared to James in 1 Corinthians 15:7. And James believed. James eventually became the leader of the Jerusalem church and was instrumental in motivating the Jewish background believers to prioritize sharing the gospel with Gentiles. And of course, we see this in Acts chapter 15. He wrote one of the letters that's in our Bible today. and it is the book of James, giving wise instruction on God's wisdom, trials, words, obedience, prayer, and a lot more. According to the ESV.org, James wrote this letter around AD 40 to 45 to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, which means it was meant for Jewish background believers who were scattered throughout most of the ancient Mediterranean world. We remember in our study of the book of Acts that great dispersion took place, and this is the same dispersion. He addressed it to the 12 tribes. Compared to salutation in Acts 15:23, the letter sent by the Jerusalem Council, which was also probably written by James, the apostles and the elder brethren unto the brethren which are of the Gentiles in Antioch and Syria and Cilicia, greetings. He uses that same style of using the word greetings as he does in the book of James. Here James is writing primarily to Gentile believers, while the book of James is addressed to Jewish believers, as we said, who were scattered throughout the Mediterranean world. It seems that the Christians to whom James is writing are being tested in their faith, because James spends considerable time encouraging them and giving them perspective on trials and suffering. And of course, there was great persecution, as we've seen in the book of Acts and other New Testament books. The early church, the first century church, did experience much persecution. James instructs them on how to live lives of prayer and action, using the wisdom that God will graciously provide them, even in the midst of hard times. The central verse of the book of James is James 1:22. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. And of course, what this means is that we should not just hear the word, but we should obey it by doing it. As we continue in the next several weeks to look at the book of James, hope you'll join with me, and we'll talk about this. You see this, the words trials and temptations. I want to give just a little bit of definition to these two words before we close out. The word trials in a believer's life pertains to the trials of life. Many times God works through those trials in helping us to mature and to grow, or helping us to learn lessons of life and to depend on Him more deeply. There's just all kinds of advantages that can come out of trials. We call that time being in the valley, and the opposite of that is mountaintop experience. So a believer's valley experiences make up the trials that they go through. Job is one great example of a man who went through many trials, but in the end, his faith was stronger. He was a stronger believer of the Lord, and was more effective for him. Now, this word temptations, that's what we'll see in James, that temptations is what Satan sends our way to tempt us Temptation is not sin, but if we fall to that temptation, then we commit sin. So on one hand, we have trials that God can use for our good. On the other hand, there's temptations that the devil wants to use for our downfall. And so these subjects will be coming up as we continue to study the book. Again, I want to invite you to our worship service this coming Lord's Day, 10 a.m. And we're going to be continuing our look at the doctrine of last things, signs of the end times. And you know, we're living in the last days, and the Lord surely is coming back for us very soon. So this is a subject that all believers should be looking at. So hope you'll join with us on the Lord's Day.